Hello and welcome to another episode of the Transfer Show here on Anfield Index. I'm Trev Downey. I'm joined, of course, by Dave Davis to talk about, I'd like to tell you, flogging a dead horse, because there's nothing really out there, because that has been our default setting for a few windows in a row. But no, it's all happening. Lots of wild things being talked about, and some things becoming very, very close to concrete as well, both in and out. It's literally, I know it's an overused phrase, but it's a hell of a time to be a Red, Dave.
It is. This is almost the opposite of what we're used to. We've had windows where we're like scrambling around going like there's maybe a loan or stuff like that. Now, even in the last hour, I was thinking I was going to eat a nice sort of choc ice just before we because it's warm here, just before we got going. And as I'm eating that, they're still dropping bombs from Pornstein and all that, aren't they? There is so much going on. It is unreal.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I had a Magnum because why not? It's a lovely sunny day. As you say, bombas left, right, and center. Let's just get straight into it because people are going to be eager to hear what we have. And to be fair as well, there is a lot across, especially people who are into the Twitter X space. There's a lot floating around. Let's start off with the PSR story, which may not sound sexy to some people, but has quite important ramifications when we get to what will be our second story around a dream signing striker. So you had a chat, I think, with journalist pal of yours of late. You can name check him and just go through the details here around the PSR deadline of the 30th of June and why it might be relevant.
Yeah, there's two big numbers here, 48 and 30. And as it's got out on the screen there, shout out to Lewis Steele, who the little bugger postponed me today. So we've got him tomorrow, ladies and gents, to fully explain himself and justify his decision. But as he tweeted at 7 a.m., you feel like he had an inkling, didn't he, Trev? It's a big 48 hours for Liverpool as record signing Florian Wirtz is jetting to England. And we saw him land, didn't we? Manchester Airport, 4:45 on the tarmac. Didn't see the Mercedes Vito, which was a little bit of a shame, but maybe some of the listeners have got pictures of that and they'll be going around social media. So that one, we're just waiting for the coverage of that and looking forward to that tomorrow, we should say as well. Also, as he mentioned, Milos Kerkez. Now, in his article, Lewis said that that's pretty much agreed around 40 million. It's just like small minor details, but that's fully expected to be confirmed very shortly. And then, that little bit of the tweet there on the screen, ladies and gents. Next up, balance the books with sales and go for a number 9/centre-back. Well, it's interesting what's been developing today, hasn't it, in that regard? Almost a spoiler line. And just to finish it off, the second part of that tweet was about Andy Robbo. So we're waiting on his decision, which I think everyone knows what will be coming realistically, but we're moving towards that sale potentially at the same time. And the reason, you're right, we mentioned the 30th. It's easy to forget the 30th is almost the accounting deadline, if you want to call it that, from the Premier League, isn't it? The PSR deadline where clubs file their accounts. And a few might say, well, hold on, aren't they doing a new system? Well, there is a shadow system the Premier League are operating, but right now for this campaign, it's the 30th of June that the books close for this season, which means, Trev, if clubs are going to need to, quote unquote, balance the books or make a big sale or maybe give one of their big players to another team, they've not got too long to get it done, have they?
Now, who on earth could you be considering in this conversation, Dave? Because that's really that's where I was driving the bus in terms of my introduction to this section and leading into our next story. I think it is important for people to be aware that clubs will be wanting to do things because of the rules that exist. Let's just address the elephant in the room that is the Isak story that won't go away. And, I don't know if you saw this, but we had a lovely clip from our last show, which got put up courtesy of someone from our Gibble on Twitter. And it was deliberately put up there, I think, to, let's just say, farm a bit of attention. My God, I had to mute the conversation Lads were coming out left, right, and centre in absolute disbelief and disgust at the idea of Isak to Liverpool. And what our story had been originally was that Newcastle were interested in Jota. I literally had to mute it because there was so many people coming out of the blue to give me abuse and you abuse and Anfield Index abuse and everybody else. We're simply saying what we have been told. Now, the Isak thing becomes a live prospect here in relation to your first bit of info. Just spell it out for folks so they know.
Yeah, I think it's been all across Twitter, X, any social media that you use, hasn't it, about the potential of Alexander Isak to Liverpool. And there's a few things just to be crystal clear on. It still feels unlikely, doesn't it, because of the fee, the position Newcastle are in, as we said before, with Champions League. Are Newcastle willing sellers? That's the other question. You know, there's a lot of things. We're not saying this is likely, but you've just got to look at where the traffic's heading over the last few days even. You've had Romano talking about it as it's Liverpool's dream signing still, as we've said, that Alexander Isak comes to Anfield. You've had TalkSport, be it Alex Crook, Ben Jacobs mentioning that, you know, you can't rule out Liverpool from this. Even at a record signing, they wouldn't be against it. It shouldn't just be the fee mentioned there. Lewis Steele as well has mentioned in recent times that, you know, you cannot rule out, not saying it's likely, but cannot rule out Alexander Isak, and even suggested something around 130, 140 million could be possible at the same time as well. So all that comes into the mix, and probably like a million other different people, we've been digging today, haven't we, trying to get info, is anything on it? And God, I'd love to tell you he was on the way in Mercedes Vito right now, but we don't have that. What we do have, though, as you know, Trev, is that from our info, Alexander Isak wants this move and has told Newcastle he wants this move at the same time as well. So that's maybe a starting point. It's important to say, does it make it likely? No, we cannot say that. But the one thing, as we discussed before we came on air, the big thing about this move so far, and I'm saying so far because things can change in 24 hours, no one shot it down, have we? We've not had bad news peers. We've not had no one's come out and said, this is pie in the skies, a load of nonsense. I don't know where we're getting this from at all. It has not been shot down yet. This could well happen in the near future, don't get me wrong. But for all those reasons, we ain't saying it's likely. You cannot discount Alexander Isak ending up at Anfield just yet.
It's tremendous for so many reasons. It's interesting the way you frame that too, because the Alvarez link was sort of tamped down a lot, I think, by the concept that it was going to have to be some sort of a swap, and now it looks like Darwin maybe headed elsewhere, so less likely, even though he is, I think, for both of us, at least level with Isak in terms of people you'd love to bring in. But you're right. The fact that it won't go away, the fact that it hasn't, because we know these guys are usually, it's I won't say it's their favorite thing, but they can't wait to wee on the parade, shall we say. So look, it is interesting that it's still live. But of course, it's almost as interesting that we're making this statement of intent in terms of targets that we want. And you'd like to think, and you and I were speaking just before the mics went live here, that say we do miss out on Isak, because like you said, likely, no, not likely, that's not a word I'd use. But say we do miss out on Isak, that there must be a similar statement with money of a similar level for some other similar target. And if we take out Alvarez, it brings us to Mr. Ekitike, who we've been told is very interested in the move to Liverpool. And whereas he's not in that kind of top tier star level of immediate plug and play, I think an awful lot of people rate him very highly. However, there's a hefty old price tag associated with Ekitike too, Dave.
Yeah, it does feel like if Liverpool have to start working down the list, if you can't get Isak, then Ekitike is up there. And all the suggestions are that, again, from digging, everyone wants Liverpool. Isak wants Liverpool. Ekitike wants Liverpool. It's almost like everyone's waiting by the phone, as you said, waiting for that call. And can we do the deal with the clubs? And it seems quite clear that Ekitike wants Liverpool. Hence, there's been no move to Chelsea at all yet. United approaches have been rebuffed from him as well. He's almost waiting until he knows that it can't be done or the call comes through. Now, as you said, people have been, I love when people play around with the figure, because sometimes people look to quote 100 million euros, don't they? And then the next time people are saying it's 84 million quid, which, depending if you get them at Tesco or Asda, are probably about the same, really, aren't they? So it's all about, you feel, if it does go down to Ekitike on the list, can we knock that price down a little bit? It will be interesting to see. And you do wonder about this as well. People will be mentioning Osimhen, like we've done before in the chat, haven't we, around the Nunez story and different bits, which we'll come to as well. But everyone wants Liverpool, Trev. This is almost, in the best possible way, a very different situation to the last window. And I just don't know what's going to happen. As I said to you before, I would not put serious money on which is the next attacker that ends up at Anfield. But if you're asking me what our info is, Isak and Ekitike want it to be them.
So, in the vein of exciting things, if you get a chance, check your Twitter DMs there and you'll see I forwarded a photograph. It's not a Mercedes Vito. It is, in fact, a Volkswagen of some sort. But through the blacked out windows, you can see the lurking little head of a certain German lad who may be joining us now. It could be photoshopped, but again, everybody's mad for that first picture and to see it and prove that it's real. We're no different. So if anything is happening during the show, folks, we'll bring it to you, and Dave can decide whether or not that's worth blowing up the photograph and popping it into the chats there. But we will move on because we have so much to get through here, and there are going to be obviously many more, I think, than people originally thought, outgoings, with such an intention to spend apparent from the club. The story we should start with here is the one that's very, very big at the moment, and being given the added heft of the Joycean approval, and that's Jarell Quansah to Leverkusen. But there are others as well linked to that England under-21 team in terms of Harvey Elliott, at least anyway. And more stories are in Harvey today as well. I saw several of them. I was talking about them in the Daily Red too. Will you start us with Jarell Quansah to Leverkusen? This is one that's making people very, very uneasy, Dave. People who rate him very highly and are struggling to see any sense in this and talking about buyback clauses and all the rest of us. Walk us through the reported fee that Leverkusen are willing to pay, and then we can go out of that and into the Harvey Elliott stuff.
Yeah, I mean, this was literally an Ornstein bomb about, 20 minutes or so before we went live, wasn't it? That Liverpool are on the verge of doing this deal, aren't they, with Bayer Leverkusen, 40 million or just north of 40 million euros, which translates around the 33, 34 million pound mark. And if you kind of think about the way we've done business, and we're doing a lot of business, aren't we, with Bayer Leverkusen this summer, in essence, it's only a little bit more than we've paid for Jeremy Frimpong, isn't it? Do you remember he was about 30 million quid with his release clause? So it's quite a similar amount, sort of moving the players between the club, almost like chess pieces, doesn't it? So everyone's expecting this to now go through. And I'm going to be honest on Quansah. It's quite clear Arne Slot doesn't fancy him. I think people have forgot that when Joe Gomez was fit for that brief period this season, he was the sub that often came on for Canate or replaced him. Quansah, when they've all been fit, has been fourth choice. His minutes have been so limited since he was taken off at halftime against Ipswich. So he wants to play. He's got a chance, or he thinks he's got a chance of getting in that England World Cup squad as well, hasn't he, Trev? So he wants to play right now. And he talked the other day, if people forget, about taking that next step. So the next step is go to a side, play regularly, set up for the World Cup. So it just works in that regard for him. And like you said with Harvey, it is going to be fascinating what happens with him, because I know you mentioned it on Daily Red. There's various stories in there, inquiries from, we've had Villa, Forest, Wolves, Newcastle at one point as well, although that was under Paul Mitchell previously. So there's plenty of interest there. I suppose as a few of the reports say, Liverpool clearly advertising a fee north of 40 million. It's interesting, what will teams pay for him that way? I mean, he did all right at the England Under-21 Championships, but he came off at half-time last night. It wasn't the best performance from him that way against Germany. And then the other one still in England Under-21 camp, Tyler Morton, which it seems to have gone a little bit quiet on offers for that kid as well. So we'll see if anything arises there. But it's looking clearly like 3 Reds are in the England Under-21 camp, and not all will be returning home this summer.
Yeah, remarkable to see how close this Quansah thing looks to be getting all of a sudden, from being something that was dismissed as a silly rumor to, like you say, getting the Joyce stamp. It's very, very interesting to watch. The Harvey stuff, of course, still very vague as yet, and it's not going to be down to this under-21 tournament. People have a huge sample size of Harvey Elliott, just not recently, alas, because he went from being a Klopp regular to an Arne Slot bit part merchant. So that's had a hard impact on him, and we should be realistic, I think, about transfer value in that regard. We can all say, we can project what we think as Liverpool fans we've seen from him over the years, but other people may not have that front of mind, if you know what I mean. Our next story that we want to get to, our next 2 stories really, are a bit further outgoings. And we'll start with Endo and Kostas Tsimikas. Both of whom seem to be either saying they definitely want to stay overtly like Endo has, or talking about how they're quite happy like Tsimikas has. But you can't help but think, Dave, that both of them might be valuable pieces in whatever chess maneuvers the club are playing financially. Is there anything real to this? And obviously then why not roll in Luis Diaz here? We can bring him back towards the end because there's some Barca-related news that might be relevant. But it looks like Diaz as well, and just reading between the lines with some of the things he's been saying, might also, well, we know he's weighing up his options. He's been clear about it in interviews. So let's just focus on those 3 first, and then we'll take another 2. But Endo, Tsimikas, Diaz in that order.
Yeah, there was a few in Discord talking about this morning, and the info I got, which I put in there as well, is that this is almost a situation where Liverpool are wondering how much they're going to have to play hard ball, was the expression I used. Because, as we've said many times, the plan for this summer from Liverpool is to naturally, and I adore some of these players. I love Endo, I love the gum shield, the whole mantra and everything he does, but there's no real future for Endo at Anfield or Tsimikas really under Arne Slot. Doesn't mean they're bad players. They're just not fancied by the head coach, aren't they? There's no real future there. And especially with the additions that are being made, it looked even less of a chance in that regard. So people are naturally, or I think we're naturally expecting stuff to unfold. But in both their native countries, they've kind of come out with interviews, haven't they? And it's interesting what they've said, that Endo with the, I'm staying, why would I want to play anywhere else? As though, why are you asking me that? But he did finish his interview. It's interesting, saying, I am staying for now. So it's interesting to see how the summer unfolds and what will happen there. But we all love Endo, great character, but you just don't see his minutes, do you, in that regard? And Tsimikas, interestingly, as well, because, I mean, not being disrespectful, but you look at the clubs he's been linked with, like Wolves, Leeds, clubs of that ilk, who he would clearly start at, wouldn't he? He'd be a great player, a great signing for them. But as he said in his homeland as well, I'd rather play 27 to 29 games here than at 40 or more at another club. And he actually said, you saw how much he loves Liverpool in his interview. He actually used this word as well. Liverpool are like the Broadway of football clubs. Like, there's a lot to like about Tsimikas and Endo, isn't there, in terms of their attitude, what they bring. However, why this is going to sound mean, that doesn't translate to what Liverpool's plans are, does it? That we know who's coming in. We've talked about Kerkez. and those bits. We talked about potential midfield additions and the rework there. You just don't see them getting any minutes or any real options. And Liverpool are clearly looking at potentially moving those out. But now if they're saying we're not going anywhere, how hard ball do you play, Trev? Because, I mean, look at Chelsea last season when their players did it. They sent them to train at leisure centres, didn't they? Removed their lockers and all those types of things. We're never going to do that. We're never going to go to that end of the spectrum. But at the same time, we are the opposite end of, or we're not anymore, of the old Jurgen Klopp. Like, no, we're all in it together. We're well away from that, aren't we? So you do wonder how this navigates. And Liverpool have got to be really careful in the way they play it. And Luis Diaz as well. Be honest, as we've said all pretty much the summer on this chat, that Liverpool are planning on potentially selling him, that if he won't, he's not going to get a renewal from us, full stop. So if he wants more money, you've got to move to another football club. We know the message they're sending to him. It looks like Barcelona are going to take a left wing option, which we'll come to as well, which then leaves that, from what we know, unless something develops, Saudi bag or nothing really, doesn't it? Stay with us, but don't get a contract increase. Go into the football wilderness, but take a whacking great pay packet that way. So I am really intrigued, as Louis Steele talked about sales and the priority there. If Liverpool are going to do everything they want, they've got to make sales, haven't they? They've still got to balance the books and make sure the squad numbers are right at the same time. So I am fascinated to see just how or what type of hardball they're going to play with some of these players.
You fancy, don't you, that if anyone's going to be on the receiving end of the hard ball, it will be Luis Diaz, because he is the one who has the highest likely incoming for us. And if someone like Endo wants to hang around and isn't on massive wages, you could see how Arne Slot would be okay with it. You could see how he'd be okay with the Tsimikas thing as well. I see lots of chat over and back that I'm familiar with in real life conversations as well about, well, we can't do too much change of the squad. And that's where we were as well, Dave, until things started happening. And now it looks like this might actually be this wholesale change that we were slightly giddily predicting months ago. And now, well, a couple of months ago, and now it seems to be very much a thing. There are two other lads that I want to talk about in terms of outgoings. Before we might actually do one more, but let's talk about Darwin Nunez and Federico Chiesa. And it's tempting to put Chiesa in the same sort of bracket as Endo and Tsimikas, but he's not at all, because he doesn't have the longevity of Liverpool career that Tsimikas does, and he is, again, not as valued as a useful chess piece as Endo is, it seems, just judging by the season gone by. Lots of people talking about getting him a proper pre-season, and who knows what could happen. And the lad's clearly a talented footballer. But then the other way of looking at it is, well, maybe we could get a little bit more for him now than we paid for him. And Darwin Nunez is the second piece here. We've all known Darwin's on the move for a long time. Darwin has been on the move since last Christmas, when we decided to not let him move. It was always going to happen. And now Napoli are very strongly linked with him. I wonder, will PSR come in to this conversation?
Yeah, you'd be astonished beyond belief if these two are still at the club come the summer. And as you mentioned there, he's on the screen, Chiesa. Gattuso, the new Italy manager, talking about him, saying he must play more. It's important. Our doors are always open, but we need Fede to play on a more regular basis. And it's World Cup year. We know he wants to go back to Italy. He wants to get a move there. So Liverpool are just now trying to see, and it looks like Napoli are possible, what's the best deal they can do for that. Again, the info's not really changed, though, Trev, around it was looking at, paying part of the wages. They weren't getting the loan with the obligation and that. So we'll see if anything develops more around Napoli. And obviously Napoli can't lowball particularly, because we know they've got that Champions League money coming, haven't they? They've just won the title there, Serie A. So that comes into the mix. And as Di Mauricio and even Romano's reported again today, they are still trying for Darwin Nunez. That there's potential for agreement with the player. The only thing I don't like, and this is where we always thought it could fall down a little bit, Napoli may like Darwin Nunez. Napoli may be able to agree a deal with wages-wise Darwin Nunez, but then there's the fee for Darwin Nunez when Liverpool are clearly looking for around 70 million quid. And I even saw suggestions from various Italian outlets that Napoli are talking around the 50 million quid mark. Now, there's gaps to bridge sometime, and you never know, but I just get the feeling that ultimately Darwin won't end up at Napoli. I just feel Liverpool will almost set a marker of saying, what's the minimum we will accept? And I do think that's important to say, because there's clearly other striker targets that we're looking at, and you do feel those are linked to getting Darwin out and getting that portion of money for the first down payment, as it were, on potentially those players. But I am intrigued just to see what the fee is with Darwin. And just as a gut, this doesn't mean it's fact. Based on what we're hearing, I would be surprised if he ends up at Napoli right now.
Well, that's really interesting that you go there, because somebody's put in the chat, well, Diaz isn't going to leave because Barca want Nico Williams now. More of that later. But I guess the phrase I would say in response to that, I think it's Jono, is other clubs are available. And, these are the initial links. As the summer wears on, we are aware that we have an asset there, and clubs will become increasingly desirous of their own asset. And someone will pay a fee for Darwin Nunez that will be acceptable to Liverpool. And of course, maybe as the summer wears on, Dave, Darwin Nunez, Luis Diaz, both start to think, maybe I'll just go for the money. Maybe the money's the thing. So I think you can't, it's so early in this second window that we can't, the initial stories are great. The links are great. But if clubs are hardballing us for a fee, you just park it, don't you? And keep a steady hand, I guess, Dave. What do you reckon on that?
Yeah, I agree. I think they'll almost have an idea, like you said, won't they, of what's the minimum we'll accept? What will we do business at? And sometimes it might be like, okay, we could probably get more, but we'll take the minimum if it allows us to do a deal now, for the targets we want in that PSR window. But if they aren't absolutely dependent on that, they think they can make the figures work. Edwards, Hughes and others have proved before, or Ward, proved before, that they'll sit on the hands a little bit, won't they? They'll just keep the powder dry, so to speak, and wait for things to come in if they don't hit that minimum bid they're looking for. Nunez is the one you still feel could be crucial to everything we want to do. So it will be interesting to see how that one develops.
Yeah, so many people. And I don't think they're naive enough to have banked on a huge amount of money from Saudi Arabia for Nunez. But part of me worries that they have. I've just put Adam up on the screen there because Adam's bored. He doesn't like the idea of tracking flights from South London and from Newcastle. Dude, you're going to have to pivot into Mercedes Vito tracking, Adam. If we get these players, it's all good. Let's finish with the South London reference, Dave, because this is the other one that's been very, very, very dominant today, and it's the Marc Guehi story. There have been links going back since Adam was a boy, not the previous Adam, about Marc Guehi to Liverpool, at least a couple of windows as well. But it seems now as if that might be becoming real. And I think one of the reasons why people were considering it might be a real thing in the past, apart altogether from someone said he's too short for Liverpool. And I mean, I guess that. But the main one was that some people were fancying they could see Joe Gomez go in the opposite direction. I'm not sure what I make of that. What do you make of these Marc Guehi stories? And is there a Gomez link at all?
Yeah, I did the Daily Red yesterday, and I said on the Daily Red that we'd even got an update that day that Liverpool were back in talks with Marc Guehi's agency. And it's funny how things just seem to have accelerated. And it almost feels like we're in a house buying chain now, doesn't it? As though one player's got like three players have got to move to almost join the dots and stir it around to end at the destination. Almost like, when there's those house purchasing chains, like the young couple with the baby from Bromsgrove want to buy the house from the old spinster with the cat. So then the bachelor lifestyle guy can move into the duplex, and it all feels like we're moving it around a little bit. And it does feel that now that Quansah looks like he's likely to depart, that probably explains why this sort of link has come to life all of a sudden to us yesterday. It is interesting to say his agency is the same as Anthony Gordon's. So Liverpool are in active talks with that agency already. So,
why?
Yeah, indeed. One maybe to like, one maybe to lot night. But for an England international, a year left to go on his deal, got that experience as well. I think this is a great move personally, because it's clear that Slot doesn't fancy Quansah no matter what anyone thinks of him. So to get Guéhi in, minimum worst case it gives you, Trev, is cover for Konate. And if Konate does depart for any reason, as it may well possibly do, you've got another ready-made centre-half. Even if you don't think he's as good, and everyone will have opinions, a ready-made senior centre-half to go. So that is absolutely brilliant for me if we do this deal at the right price. Gomez, yeah, there's quite a few links kicking around for Joe Gomez, and people saying, as you mentioned, Crystal Palace have been mentioned. Sunderland were again in the mix, which I found very odd. But quite Villa, like a number of clubs have apparently got interest in Joe Gomez. Again, though, it just comes back to what we said last week. Who's going to pull the trigger for Joe Gomez? Especially with the talk of 25 to 30 million. Now, as I'm saying this, please, people, I adored Joe Gomez. I think he's a great player, on his day. I think he's got his real uses. He can cover anywhere across the back four as well, can't he? He's got real value there. But the injury record is, well, it's just known. It's just fact, isn't it? So I am still wondering which club would pull the trigger for Joe Gomez. It almost feels like, again, from what I've heard, that he is on people's lists, but it's as they start maybe missing out on targets, like Joe Gomez comes down on the list again, if that makes sense. So a lot of people have said that. And the other theory that's doing the rounds, I'll be honest, I'd forgotten until this was said to me today. Crystal Palace made a bid for Ben Doak, didn't they? Do you remember in January that about 70 million quid there's rejected? So people said, could that be in the mix? And I've not heard anything on it at all since then. I'd be lying, but it's a fair sort of valid theory worth putting forward. But I think it does have to be in a chain, as in, I'm almost jumping into the next section. If we get Guéhi, it's Quansah going to Leverkusen, and I'm sure people have seen the stories. Palace are in talks with Diamande, aren't they, at Sporting Lisbon, all around the 40 million, somewhere around there, round robin, past the parcel for your centre-half type of job. So we'll see if that comes to fruition. We'll see. Please, Lord, no, if it links to Anthony Gordon or anything like that. But there feels like there is a proper chance Marc Guehi ends up at Anfield this summer.
Just a little wrinkle there for that, because we mentioned it earlier on, didn't we, in terms of Fede Chiesa and upcoming international tournaments. And Nikolai in the chats mentions that Guéhi might want guaranteed game time because of the World Cup. But, he was a favoured son there in terms of the international team until quite recently. If it is ongoing, I don't follow international football. So that's an interesting point too, one that would certainly factor into it. You imagine if he's moving, he's going to be moving with at least a belief he's going to play. So very, very interesting for sure.
I think just to come in on that, sorry, Trevor, it is important to say Liverpool are always clear in their dealings. They never guarantee game time. They're always clear on agents, to players to say, like, they never you're going to play. They never do that because of the nature of competition, as they're clear. But I do totally agree, whoever's made that point, it is World Cup year. And Thomas Tuchel's talked about players needing to play at a certain level to really be in his thinking. So that will come into the midst as well. But you do then naturally, as we said, question marks around Konate. And also, as I thought, it sounds a bit Machiavellian now, doesn't it? I mentioned this on the last pod. Liverpool can put a bit of pressure on Konate then, can't they, in that regard? Well, if you're not going to sign, we've got Guéhi. Good luck trying to get in the French World Cup team and everything like that, Ibu. So I do wonder, again, does Ibu come into the hardball mix as well?
I like that angle personally because I think the club could do at least one more card to play when it comes to Ibu's situation. None of us want to see him go at
No.
all. And another just interesting wrinkle there is when Palace bid for Doak, I'm not sure that number was released, Dave, because I remember there was a lot of conversation about what Liverpool fans thought he was worth as opposed to what genuinely we could likely expect. It was the same conversation as people were having for Kelleher at one point, with Harvey Elliott at one point as well. It's that whole thing of us overrating what players are actually probably worth. I'm not saying us as in you and I or the sensible viewers or listeners we have on our show here, but the kind of chat in the ether. What sort of money do you think would represent a reasonable fee for someone like Doak for Liverpool?
For me, it was interesting. As you said, Liverpool put the advertisement out there, and especially with the Everton interest in the summer around 30 million. But when you go back to January, the two offers they had that were Palace and Ipswich, funnily enough, were 16.5 million and 17 million, which is a long way short, isn't it, from the rumoured 30 million? Not that that was ever it was always just a starting point for negotiations, wasn't it? To me, being honest, it smacks of a Carvalho style deal. Somewhere like 20 million, maybe plus add-ons. That's what I honestly think he's worth in the market because he's done quite well. Middlesbrough, hasn't he, in the Championship? He is Premier League unproven, but Liverpool, especially Edwards, they seem very good at selling that level of player. Probably the weirdest thing is we usually sell them to Brentford nowadays. So I wonder if they'll come in at some point under a new manager. But somewhere around 20 million, I'd say, with add-ons seems reasonable.
Yeah, and that is a fair point to make as well. The club has a history in recent years, especially with Edwards around the club, of getting remarkable fees for lads who we wouldn't have thought were worth it. This is almost the opposite in some ways. We should move away to the Premier League because it's getting close to the 40-minute mark and we haven't even touched on that yet. We'll start with Man City. Very, very interested to see what happens around Jack Grealish this summer. I think an awful lot of people are. We mentioned on previous shows that they have gone in early and done quite a bit of business. Is it 4 or 5 they've already got over the line? What is the current state of play with Grealish, and is there anything else going on there with City at the moment?
Pep Guardiola's post-match after the Club World Cup the other night, no one cared about the game, but the post-match talking was brilliant because he got asked, if you remember, Kyle Walker did that. I think he's got his own podcast, hasn't he, with the BBC, where he'd said, I would have given up any of my titles at City just to win one with Spurs. And that got put to him. And he had a bit of a rant, if anyone saw it, did old Pep. And he was actually asked about the captaincy because the players apparently at City, a bit like us, have picked the captains group and the leadership group. And he actually said, I will pick it this season. And he proper snapped a little bit as he said it, like, I will pick the captain, like no messing around, like proper Tom Hanks on that movie in the middle of the ocean type of job. Like he is picking the captain, no doubts about it. So that was funny. And then speaking of Kyle Walker, of course, when you release a 58-year-old Ashley Young and you want youthful legs back in the side at Everton, of course, Kyle Walker makes sense, doesn't he? So he's the latest one. And it just feels like an Everton signing. His legs have gone. He's got no real other skills. Of course, he's an Everton right back, ready to take out our left winger at some point next season. And Jack Grealish, also linked with Everton, also linked with Spurs. There is a few overseas links, European links we'll talk about with Jack Grealish as well. But Pep also mentioned him in the interview, say, yeah, great lad, needs to get a move, needs to play football, needs to get love. And then the only weird thing to mention about City, Trev, is he was asked about further signings. He said, I'm very happy with what we've done. I would like further signings, but I want a small squad. And everyone was like, hey? It's like, oh no, I still want a few, but I want a smaller squad. So basically, I'm guessing Pep wants to probably sign another 2 or 3 and sell 5 or 6, I'm guessing is what he's sort of alluding to. But yeah, City are definitely not done for this summer.
Now, you're a man who continues to watch football like an absolute lunatic, even when the season's over. I can neither relate nor understand, but I have a question for you. in relation to something I've seen popping up again and again and again in the chats, how prominent was little Pepijn Lijnders on the sideline? Was he Jack in the Box prominent? Was he Newcastle assistant manager prominent? Or was he very much sitting back in the bench and minding his own P's and Q's?
He was like a hobbit skipping to a ring-based adventure. He was. You should have seen him in front of the cameras, giving it all. Like the intensity was there, and they were filming the drills and everything. And the hands were going, and the screaming, and the like Chuck Norris style, like chops and directing thing. The full Lijnders repertoire was going on, and people were being shouted. There was even one point he was pulling Bernardo Silva. Bernardo Silva, that player, probably has no idea where he's supposed to be, apparently. Like dragging him around like a proper Sunday League manager type of thing. So honestly, it was just, you can just tell he is adoring the camera. And they did the whole like, I got Klopp's permission for Lijnders and all that nonsense thing as well. But yeah, Pepijn was enjoying himself big time.
I mean, I actually just find it amusing, as opposed to, I'm not, a lot of people seem to be completely butthurt about it. I'm not. I think it's fantastic that he's there with them. I had started to be very disillusioned with that lad well before he left, so I just find it funny. Morgan Rogers is someone that you personally have said you'd love to see at Liverpool at one point. It doesn't seem as if that's a really direction of travel for Morgan at the moment, but Arsenal and Chelsea certainly like the look of him. And again, the old PSR date may be looming here, Dave.
Yeah, weirdly, I want this to pass and be a non-story, if you know what I mean, because I do like Morgan Rogers as a player. I think he is a super talent. And as a few have had stories out recently, Chelsea and Arsenal are both keeping an eye on this, just in case Villa, who are naturally rumoured, aren't they, to be close to the sort of the line and even looking to sell a player, are open, as a lot of quoting it, to a sale. So everyone's waiting to pounce on this in the form of Chelsea and Arsenal, aren't they? And I really hope they don't get the opportunity, in all honesty, because I do like the player. I do hope he stays at Villa for his own development that way as well. But yeah, it's one I hope doesn't come to fruition, and hopefully Villa do not need to sell.
Yeah. Next story up, and kudos to Cam Brench for a reference there to a murder and football story, which I'll leave you to make your own judgments about. Brighton, Newcastle. Stories around these two, and I want to focus in particular, if you can, on João Pedro, because again, with the links to Jota, the very strong links to João Pedro, this is why some people were starting to think that the fantasy of Isak to Liverpool may not be just quite so fanciful. We know Eddie Howe is looking to get people in. What's the story around Brighton and Newcastle, and the stories with both of them?
Yeah, it's busy, isn't it? Brighton have signed another player, a centre-half called Coppola. So Francis Ford's lad is in, isn't he? So they've got another one on their books as well. So that's another random overseas deal. And they always get good value. That's not me being flippant. Will be a star at Brighton and how they do things. That also links, funnily enough, to Van Hekke, their Dutch centre-half. Seems that Newcastle are also looking at him in their options because, again, they're moving down the list of players they're trying to attract there. On the screen, as we mentioned, João Pedro, that this one seems there's real legs in it, that we would all love it to be that João Pedro's going to Newcastle because we know where Alexander Isak's going. That's what we'd love to say. However, just a note of caution on this, Newcastle have been trying to get another forward in for quite a while. We can't forget they tried for Kuna, lost out to United. They tried for Mbeumo. Look, that looks like it's going to be United again, doesn't it? Or possibly Spurs. They lost that battle. So Newcastle are moving down their list as well. And there's been a little bit of a, as some people have called it, a recruitment void, the Geordie reporters, because Paul Mitchell's moved out and who's sort of doing things, who's trying to sort things, why that battle's ensued. We love a good side story though, Trev. As it came out this week, Newcastle are trying to make Julian Ward, our boy, our FSG boy, the technical director, is in the running to be the sporting director there, which I'm going to be honest, if Julian Ward has got any sense, run a mile from that. Because think how structured FSG Liverpool have been and what he's now working in at the moment. And possibly even, a multi-club model if we do get Getafe or FSG get Getafe and come on board. To give you an idea of how much Eddie Howe has a say in things, Eddie Howe's promoted his own nephew in the recruitment process as well now. So Eddie Howe's nephew was some sort of I think junior deputy is probably the official title I'm getting wrong, but has promoted him so he's senior in terms of recruitment. I mean, have you ever heard anything like this since the time Fergie made his brother the chief scout all those years ago? Do you know what I mean? Type of thing. So why Julian Ward would want to get involved in anything like that is beyond me. But yeah, a lot happening at Brighton and Newcastle just now.
Yeah, the Julian Ward thing, when I saw it first, I remember thinking in a moment of craziness, well, that could be another piece of the puzzle that we're looking to solve, right? That's what jumped into my head immediately. And I saw several other people with the same idea. Maybe that could help sweeten deals and all the rest of it, right? But like you say, I'm at a loss, Dave, to know where I land with the Newcastle thing, because a lot of people would say they're trying to do it right or better than other people with similar levels of infinity money. And I'm looking at Mateus Cunha and I'm looking at Brian Mbeumo and I'm thinking, lads, I think I'd have chosen Newcastle in both situations rather than a United who are very much on the lower end of things at the moment. So it's just interesting. I wonder, is there a perception that Newcastle are, like you say, a little bit of a basket case still?
Newcastle are almost, for me, refusing to accept what they are and misunderstanding what they are. People forget, you have to go back, from City when they had all those years. Remember when they had Mark Hughes, Pellegrini come in, all Roberto Mancini, all those managers before it got to Pep. City had to, people forget this, overpay for players, didn't they, to get them there? Because players didn't really want to come to City to start with. It's taken a while and a lot of failed signings as well to get to there. Newcastle seem to be refusing to accept this. And Eddie Howe's even talked about it in interviews to say, oh, we're not going to pay the extra Saudi tax they're demanding from us, which is fine. That's your right. But then don't be surprised when players turn to other clubs and look at other alternatives. If you want to get stars, and this is no disrespect to any Newcastle fans that are watching, I like Newcastle as a club. I genuinely do, aside from all the Saudi thing, but that's a discussion for a different day. I like the sort of the fan base, the style of the club. But if you want to get top stars or bigger stars, if that's right to say, to Newcastle, you are going to have to overpay. And people forget, do you remember when Bruno came when they were in that relegation battle on massive wages and had that relegation release clause, and Kieran Trippier on massive wages as well? Why did they come there? Massive wages, big fees. Newcastle seem to be refusing to accept that. But if they want to grow and build, they need to embrace it.
Yeah, I think an awful lot of people have forgotten the evolution of Man City and the years of, as you say, overspends for lads who were not really the very, very best level, but were hugely expensive. It's a very interesting model to see what Newcastle do with it. A little bit defiant, and some might admire them for that at the moment. Leeds are on their way up, and Leeds, you've already mentioned at least once today, they are signalling intent at least, Dave.
I like this. I really like this because we mentioned last week they're after a few defenders, and it does look like they're going to land the lad from Udinese. I can't remember his second name, but Jake. So we'll just call him Jake in that regard. He sounds a good lad, doesn't he? But the big one on the screen, I mean, this would be a great move for them, wouldn't it? But they've had a bid turned down for Rodrigo Muniz, 32 million package. Fulham rejected it. I mean, we've seen Muniz in the Premier League get quite a few goals. And do you remember when, I know it was the end of the season, but do you remember that one where he brought it down out the sky and gave Van Dijk a little nudge at Craven Cottage and put it in the corner? If Leeds get him, this is the type of sort of signing where you're like, you can't go making Leeds instant favourites for straight down relegation, can you? So I'm intrigued how they're going to do it. And I like this because I am tired of a little way clubs coming up, and it's their right to. But you know, them clubs that get promoted and spend like 8 million, that everyone's surprised when they end up with like 15, 16 points. Like, if you want to have a go at the Premier League, it costs money, simple as that. So fair play to Leeds and that ownership group. It looks like they are doing.
And I think we've got one more thing, and we might as well finish with Arsenal because you'll have a better lowdown on this than I do. But from the way it was presented to me, it looks like Lewis Skelly's agent played an absolute blinder. But they're still being linked with Gyökeres, and you have at least one other interesting link as well from a far more local source. Just go through the Arsenal potential business for us.
I love the way Lewis Skelly's agents played this. He's blatantly got into that room with like the new Edu, that Berta guy, Arteta, and gone to his mate, whatever happens, ring me in 20 minutes. And they started negotiations and that. And they've taken, excuse me, sorry, Mikel, I've got to take a call. Yes? Oh, bear with me, it's Florentino Perez on the phone. What, Mr. Perez? You'll give Miles Lewis Skelly 80 grand do it? Like, just like, I think Lewis Skelly is a talented kid, don't get me wrong, but the rumoured wages they're set to get, it does feel like his agent has played this a blinder and got him a big wage at a young age on a long-term contract and got that sewn up. But yeah, you do wonder, like, the fact that they've jumped him so high so early is a big question there. But also on the screen, it feels like we're going back through Arsenal strikers, doesn't it? That they've surveyed the market, they've tried. And as Alex Crook and a few others have got there, as Alex Crook said recently, he'd had a message suggesting that Victor Gyökeres has told friends and family he expects to join Arsenal, which he was the flavour of the month. Then he wasn't, was he? Then Sesko came in and different bits. That seems to have gone quiet, but maybe. And again, suggestions that Arsenal were trying to see if Isak was available at the same time. That looks a non-starter for them. Back to Gyökeres, where you started originally. And even tonight, as the Evening Standard's got, and a few others in the Telegraph as well, Matt Law, Chelsea are looking at options, and they've had no real joy in the winger market. And in fact, they're looking to offload one in the form of Noni Madueke, the England international as well. And the Arsenal are interested in that player. So it does just feel like Liverpool and the Premier League have pressed down on the accelerator in the last 48 hours, doesn't it?
It really does. And just to address at least one comment I saw there, I think it's Brad. I believe I heard rumoured wages of 100,000 in this new contract, which when you think that that's more than established Liverpool first-teamers who are looking to wrangle their contract numbers up, that's a wild achievement if it's true. I'm not sure just how 100% certain it is. Our next area, of course, is to go around Europe. And we should start with Napoli because we've already brought them in. And we know they're interested in Nunez. You gave us a little bit of colour on that, which maybe makes it not so realistic. But I was seeing, and I'm sure you are as well, the Nunez and Chiesa to Napoli stories for a couple of days there. Was it yesterday, day before? And they are also apparently rumoured to have an interest in Grealish, as well as others. So Napoli throwing their weight around in terms of at least expressions of interest.
Yeah, they do seem like super busy, Napoli, and they seem to have a real eye on the Premier League, don't they? People forget that Scott McTominay, Billy Gilmore went there as well, didn't they? Scott McTominay, the Serie A Player of the Year, which just sounds absolutely insane to say. But even now, today, they've had a bid, I think it's been turned down for 30 million euros for Brighton's Matt O'Reilly, another Brighton player in there. But I don't know if they're playing like Football Manager 23 or something, but Jadon Sancho's of interest to them. Jack Grealish, as you've mentioned, it does seem they're really shopping in that Premier League market, doesn't it? And obviously add in Nunez and Chiesa. The only thing I saw on this is Matt O'Reilly can play midfield, attacking midfielder, but he can sort of play wide at a push. And I just thought when I saw this, I know they're different type of players, Trev, but does it have a knock-on impact on any potential move for Chiesa was something I was wondering about as well at the same time, because you never got the feeling Napoli are not that club that's going to do a £300 million spend. They're not that type of club, are they, really? So I am intrigued to see what it means, but Napoli have very much got their eye across the Premier League.
You think it's possible maybe pyramid scheme McTominay has gotten in their ears and they're getting creative financially? I mean, I'm just floating that out there. We will go next to Germany and tie in with Leverkusen. I'd be surprised if there's not a Bayern story in there. And the Xavi Simons links, which were once so strong with us, appear to be maybe getting knocked back, and maybe old Xavi Simons is not quite as popular an option for people as he and his club thought. Where do we stand with the stories coming out of Germany at the moment, starting with Leverkusen, obviously?
Yeah, Leverkusen are about to have a whole chunk of change, burning a hole in their pocket, aren't they? And who are they spending on? Well, we know, obviously, that Joel Quansah looks likely that part of that's going to go. But in terms of players that we've heard of, funnily enough, Leverkusen are looking at Bakayoko. Do you remember that PSV player? The year left on his contract, Belgium, right wing, left foot, so around 20 million. Also, and I'm probably pronouncing this wrong, the lad from Feyenoord, Igor Paixo, I think it's pronounced, but I'm probably butchering his name, a winger there on the left side they're looking at. And as you mentioned, at one stage, I mean, Liverpool were linked with both solidly, weren't they? Sesko and Simons, which I was never keen on. And I was sort of terrified. But it does seem it's gone quiet across the board for those two right now, doesn't it? That if Arsenal have moved back to Gyökeres, where does that leave Sesko, especially with the monumental fee that they've quoted? And I just love the fact that Sesko's agent is called Elvis in the first place. I think that's absolutely brilliant. But as he says on the screen, we've got a clear plan. We will never force, I like the way he phrases this, we will never force or blackmail Leipzig. Like, no one mentioned Leipzig or no one mentioned blackmail Elvis, but okay, you've brought it to the table. We do things in the right way or we don't do them. He'll only leave for a special club and project. But if there's no one willing to pay the right fee, he may just have to get used to another year in the Bundesliga. And there's still rumours with Xavi Simons, but again, nothing seems solid. And speaking of nothing seems solid, Bayern Munich look like they've missed out on their next first choice left winger, haven't they, in that regard? After Wirtz has bypassed them for us, it looks like someone else has picked Barcelona. So they're also working down the list as well. So it's not going too swimmingly for all clubs in Germany just now.
So Elvis has not left the building, is what you're saying. That's interesting. We will go to Saudi Arabia next, and there are going to be ongoing stories here. I love this one because I wouldn't have seen it, and now you've put it out there, I'm surprised I didn't. But apparently interest in Joe Linton, and we know Theo Hernandez is a guy who's looking to move. But apparently a Spurs player of note who might be thinking of grabbing a big old bag for himself as well.
Yeah, almost doing it in reverse. It does seem there's a lot of clubs on the Saudi side interested in Son, who is a Spurs legend, I think it's fair to say, because of the length of time he's been there, captain. But I think he's been a brilliant player in his pomp. But you've seen this season, like De Bruyne and others, his legs are really on the wane, aren't they? So it might be a great time for Spurs to actually get a bit of dosh for him in that regard. So we'll have to see. Joe Linton, like you said, everyone forgets the relationship that Newcastle have with the Saudis, of course. And do you remember when Newcastle needed to raise some cash the other summer that, funnily enough, Alan San-Maximin went to a Saudi Arabia club and they tried to get Miguel Almiron over there as well, who turned it down initially. So, yeah, it's funny that Joe Linton is potentially rumoured to be back on the cards, although suggestions that he won't be too keen on that. And as you mentioned, Theo Hernandez, that they couldn't get it done before the Club World Cup, but a lot of suggestions that the Saudis are still keen to get that one done. And it will be interesting as we almost get a bit later in the window and maybe Al Hilal do exit the Club World Cup, just how active are the other Saudi clubs, and especially those PIF-based ones.
Absolutely going to be a massive influence. We'll finish with Barca because it does kind of tie back into the Diaz stories that we were hearing for a long time. But apparently the magician that is Joan Laporta has managed to conjure up another financial miracle. Talk to us about that and about their priority target, if you would.
Yeah, he trumps Jesus, doesn't he? With 5 lows and 27,000 levelers, does Laporta, doesn't he? Really? So yeah, he's proud doing his announcement. We've got it back to 1-on-1, like the nightclub banter, 1 in, 1 out, balancing the Euros there with the way it's done. And he was quite beating his chest in his press conference, wasn't he? Saying, we've got one deal done, which we know is that Joan Garcia, the keeper coming in from Espanyol, fully expecting Ter Stegen to probably depart, but we'll have to see. And he was bullish to also say, we're very close to one. And everyone had a hint, but this has really accelerated in the last 48 hours, haven't they? Nico Williams, the Bilbao Spanish international, the young winger, has agreed terms with Barcelona. Now, he's on massive money at Bilbao, so I'd love to know what the deal is or what the deal isn't, shall we say, with what Barca are going to pay him. Because, I mean, suggestions that it's 7 to 8 million net a season. Well, what happens to that 1-on-1? That sounds a bit strange or a bit unbelievable, but we'll see what develops on that. And now Barca are trying to get this done. And I suppose the knock-on effect for us, we're a little bit uncertain, but Barcelona are never going to sign Nico Williams and Luis Diaz, aren't they? So it's quite clear they've picked Nico Williams, which probably deletes Barca, as we said before, off the list of options for Luis Diaz. Everyone expects this to happen, but it is Barcelona, so you're just never 100% sure.
Now, we've gone a little bit long. We're a minute over the hour or two almost. And I just want to just not wrap it up completely hurriedly just because of that, because we should sign off by saying we were kind of, well, I was him and hawing about whether or not it was a great idea to do one this evening with the likelihood of Wirtz stuff tomorrow. But there was such an accumulation of information coming in that would have been daft not to. That was your call and you were dead right. You know we're going to be back here on Monday doing the show again, because over the weekend, things will happen, won't they, Dave? Just remind people of the various things that are in play as we wrap this one up ahead of, we will be back with you on Monday evening.
Yeah, I mean, by Monday evening, so in only a few days' time, you would not be surprised. I mean, the stuff you're expecting a few nice quotes from Wirtz, aren't you? Some great photos to put up on the screen, and we're buzzing for that. It's fair to say you're expecting some announcement around Kerkez, aren't you, as the next one, like something agreed, moving that on, moving that forward. You're probably now, because of the way things have accelerated, expecting something more around Quansah as well, aren't you, in terms of a deal agreed or some news, some update on that. You're hoping, probably because Quansah's set to disappear, for maybe a little bit more on Marc Guehi, seems the one, doesn't he, or another centre-half at the same time as well. And you would love Alexander Isak to be either advanced or in some way, or happy if it's not been shot down fully as well at the same time. Because as you start to move these dates forward, people, I mean, jumping in my sort of calendar there, Monday's what? The 23rd, Trev, isn't it? The 23rd of June, Monday. Yep. That's only a week before that PSR window shuts, isn't it? So if clubs are going to do things, stuff's going to have to get moving, isn't it, in terms of sales and purchases. So I would be surprised if we've not got a fair bit more to talk about come Monday.
Yeah, in and out. So do keep it here. Lovely to see so many of you watching live. That counter just keeps getting bigger every show, which is lovely to see. If you're enjoying it, will you please tell someone about it, pass it on? That's usually the best way of getting the word out there. Thanks to all the people who engage in the comments. Sorry, I can't constantly be on top of it. It's just so much information. The stories, the show itself is the star. And if we can involve people, we will, but it can't always happen. Lovely to see your contributions there, though. So from Dave, from myself, for yet another time and in advance of being back with you within a couple of days, good luck.